immediately why the inner dimension of Malchus should be shiftless. Like, how is humility the inner dimension of Malchus? Youth wants to know. Okay, so let's look at that. It's also the experience of Malchus, because Malchus is to step out of myself and relate to others, relate to reality. Although reality is infinitely distant from Hashem, Hashem says, I put myself aside. Or we demonstrate our Malchus by putting ourselves aside. So the king puts himself aside and devotes himself to a nation. This is Malchus. The king puts himself aside and devotes himself to a nation to tend to the needs of my people. And this is activated by shiftless. So there's also narcissistic Malchus, the desire to expand my ego. But that's unrectified Malchus. So rectified Malchus is I put myself aside to tend to the needs of my people. And we're building Malchus. Malchus, another interesting idea, Malchus is speech. Like you can see when reading a little Kabbalah that Malchus is connected with speech. And it's the effort to explain something. And the effort to explain something should be motivated by shiftless, which is a very interesting idea. I found like if we want to explain something to someone, get into a place of shiftless, because by explaining, we understand it better ourselves. So I thought that was an interesting idea. Okay, so Rosh Hashanah, we want to rebuild Hashem's will to reign. We want to reignite Hashem's will to reign. We want to, okay, so this, I really like this idea. Okay, reignite his will, that he should put himself aside, that he should make creation precious again. He should put infinity aside. So this is what we're asking Hashem to do when we crown him as king on Rosh Hashanah. He should put his infinity aside. This is a big chiddush. How do we do that? Accepting the yoke, Kabbalah Soul. Kabbalah Soul means putting ourselves aside. And this awakens the tendency to reign in Hashem. Our putting ourselves aside awakens the tendency to reign. May Hashem says, maybe this is interesting. So we have this time now. We have to become, now in Rosh Hashanah, cuter and more interesting so we can reignite Hashem's will to reign. Yes, okay. Now, the Rashbi, here's a nice idea. The Rashbi spoke about the king. The Arizal painted a picture of the king. And the Baal Shem Tov says, here he is. So this is, we're getting it. We're very lucky we're in this generation because the Baal Shem Tov, whose birthday is today, Chai Elul, is telling us about Hashem. Here he is. Okay. Now, one more idea on this theme. Our shiftless, we all know shiftless means our lowering ourselves, our humility. Our shiftless creates a vacuum, and this sucks in Hashem's attention. We know a vacuum creates like the sucking in. So that sucks in Hashem, it sucks in Hashem's attention and rachamim and awakens his willingness to reign. So this is an idea we've been speaking about, that the idea of hachna'ah, when we lower the ego, that space is filled with Hashem's rachamim. So it's because it creates a suction. Lowering the ego creates a vacuum, and that draws in Hashem's attention and his rachamim. So these are the big perks of lowering the ego. It could be worthwhile. We want to awaken his willingness to reign. And this Amunah is hosting Hashem to rejoice in being Jewish. Hashem came to my house and we chatted. This is Elul. Hashem came to my house. Remember, he was the king in the field in the blue jeans. And we're hanging out. Really a great time. And this is Chayas and Elul. And I can feel I'm unworthy of hosting Hashem, but here he is. Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. Okay. So that was an idea I wanted to share. I want to make sure I'm here. Yes, looking good. We have lots of time. Okay, here's an idea that I heard from Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Jacobson on Nasira. So this was in last week's Tanya, this idea of Nasira is the surgical decoupling of Adam and Chava that happens on Rosh Hashanah, the Nasira. That's when the light, the old light goes away. So this surgical decoupling, let's talk about that. Adam and Chava are created back to back. They always know the benefits are, they always know where the other guy is. She could wash the milchik dishes and he can wash the fleishik dishes, but there's a terrible problem. They can't turn around and look at each other. They're just feeding off each other's narcissistic needs. So comes the Nasira, and they're separated. So it's very scary. Malchus is reduced to a dot, to a nakuda. But finally, they can turn around and choose to look at each other in a relationship that's not driven by narcissism, not driven by feeding off each other's problems. A relationship where they're turning to face each other. It's risky, and the idea of binyan hamalchus is they have to be face to face, that they're both getting what they panim b'panim, because they started off back to back, face to face, that I can look at you, that they can look at each other, they choose to be together. Yes, so we need to interest Hashem in recreating the world. So Hashem can think, what do I need this for, recreating the world? So we want to crown you as king, and we'll have the courage and dedication to help rebuild a shattered universe. So this is our Kabbalah's soul, that we should have the courage, let me get that right, and dedication to rebuild a shattered universe. So we're creating Hashem's interest. We're out there, we're with you. We want to help you do this. Okay, so there was an idea. Now we're getting up to the really exciting part. I want to share with you, so 13 years ago I had the schus of being in Prague at the kever, at the shul of the Maharal with Rabbi Yitzchak, who taught the Maharal's Nativ HaTshuva. We already spoke about it here together, that the simplest tshuva of the Maharal is to say to Hashem, I want to do tshuva, I want to get close to you. But now we're going to learn a very interesting mashal of the Maharal on a medrash from Yalkut Shmoni that I had the schus of hearing Rav Yitzchak teach there by the cave of the Maharal. So let's go to this Yalkut Shmoni, and then we'll see how it's explained, and then we'll learn the mashal of the Maharal. Okay. So Youth Wants to Know. In the 50s, when I was growing up, there was a TV show called Youth Wants to Know. So this is something like that. Youth, what's the question that you, Shalu, there's a question that 4 different levels of consciousness are being asked by youth. The question is, Chota ma ansho, the sinner, what is his punishment? You want to know. Maybe it's like a really juicy sin with a very small punishment, or so you can see a youth might want to know, the sinner, what is his punishment? It's a reasonable question. And the first level of consciousness that's asked is Chachma, wisdom. And wisdom answers with the words of Shlomo HaMelech from Mishlei, Chatayim tirdof ra'a. Negativity pursues the sinner. This is what Chachma answers. We're going to go over these, but let's get, so wisdom, negativity pursues the sinner. Then that doesn't sound too positive, does it? Then they go up to the next level of consciousness, Nevuah, prophecy. Shalu l'Nevuah, they ask Nevuah, Chota ma ansho, the sinner, what is his punishment? And wisdom and prophecy answers with the words of Yehezkel, who is a very fine prophet. He says, Hanefesh hachota'as hi tamus, the soul that sins shall die. Getting heavier. Now the next level of consciousness, Shalu the Torah, they ask Torah itself, Chotama, and show the sinner what is his punishment. Omer lahem, she says to them, Yahweh Asham v'yis kaperlo. Torah says, let him bring a guilt offering. Let him bring a sacrifice and he'll be atoned for. That's the Torah. And then they go all the way up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu this question, Shalu HaKadosh Baruch Hu chotama, and show the sinner what is his punishment. Omer lahem, he answers them, Yaseh tshuva v'yiskaper lo. Let him do tshuva, and he will be atoned for. Okay, so we're going to look at these. We're going to look at these 4 answers on different levels and see what's going on here. Because each one captures a necessary perspective on the road to healing. In other words, we have to go through these 4 levels. We can't start at the top. So we're going to see how we can work our way through these 4 levels. This is very exciting. We begin with Chachma, we go up to Nevuah, then Torah, until we appreciate Hashem's perspective. Of course, we all make mistakes. And then, right, the Y.Y. Jacobson joke, we all make mistakes. Now, there was one man who told his wife, you know, dear, I never made a mistake. And she said, really? And he said, yes. Oh, no, wait, 1974, I made a mistake. And she asked, what was the mistake? And he said, I thought I made a mistake. So some people don't, we all make mistakes. Was that funny, that joke? I think I'm taking that out of my repertoire. Forget it. Okay. So, mistakes. So before these 4 levels, preceding them all is honesty, to acknowledge my mistake, and then I can find a way out. I have to acknowledge my mistake in order to find a way out. So this is something, so let's do it. We're going to acknowledge our mistakes. Now we can look at wisdom. Wisdom, who says negativity pursues the sinner, is spiritual psychology. It's a good shrink, scrutinizing the human psyche, exploring the facts. And it's just like the physical laws of cause and effect. There's natural consequences to the state of our mind. There's natural consequences. So these laws govern the psyche and the soul. So let's look at it. So wisdom is saying, the psychologist responds, when I behave alien to being Jewish, the consequences are negative. When I lie, there are consequences, even if I never get caught. In other words, the psychologist is showing us we didn't really notice, but when we acted in this negative way, this was the response we got. We didn't like that response. We didn't notice that we kept on doing this. So the good shrink will point out, when you act this way, this is the response. It's not a punishment, it's a consequence. If you eat hugely, if one eats hugely, one can become obese. It's not a punishment, it's a consequence. I think that's an interesting idea, right? Okay, so Chachma says you have to be accountable to your own soul, and reality catches up with one. Nevuah. Who's the Navi? Who's the prophet? The prophet experiences Hashem. The Navi experiences Hashem's presence in a real way. The Navi is asked, what's the punishment for sin? The Navi answers, sin causes death. The Navi is telling us something deep. Every mitzvah creates an intimacy with Hashem, and every transgression creates a separation. For a Navi, life is oneness with Hashem. That's what life means to a Navi. So sin is a form of death. The Navi sees sin as a form of death. Okay, so this is quite exciting. Let's see, as we move along here. So the Navi isn't just a psychologist, just telling you the facts. If you do this, this is the result. This is where the great psychoanalyst can give you insight into your psyche. But the Navi goes further and says that intimacy with Hashem is life and separation is death. Then the Torah even goes a step further. Now we're up to level 3. The Torah, bring a korban, bring a sacrifice, and you'll be atoned for. So the Torah goes deeper and says, as deeply mistaken as we may have been, as many sins as we may have done, transgression only affects a certain part. There's a certain part of us that remains pure and sacred. This is what the Torah says, that the divine soul remains unsullied. Yes, and this is, we have to get back to that part. Let the person bring an animal sacrifice to atone for their sin. It was the animal within the person that caused the sin. So that's, I think, is very important to recognize. It's the animal in the person that causes the sin. Okay, so, but there's a part of a person that remains untouched from transgression. This is a fundamental idea of Torah, that no matter how much abuse we have done or has been done to us, there remains a part which remains pristine. There's a part of us, the soul, that remains pristine and joyous. And we can tap into that pure place that transcends. And it can be hard to tap into, but the Torah teaches there's a neshama that remains pure. So the Torah says, let him bring a asham offering, a korban. And the asham acknowledges is a part of the soul that remains pure. I think that's such an important idea of what Karbanos is. It's acknowledging that there's a part, the animals sin, but there's a part of the soul that remains pure. Sometimes psychology doesn't acknowledge that every person has a divine core. Psychology says, let me give you some clarity by showing you some patterns in your instinctive responses. Let me give you clarity by showing you patterns. But the Torah is something deeper, that there's a core that can heal us. We have a core that can redeem us and can heal us. This idea, we know Freud spoke about the id, the ego, the superego, and he taught that at the core, there's an uninhibited beast that wants to do whatever it wants to do, with whomever it wants to do it, and whenever it wants to do it. Freud said that is the beast, that's the id, the beast at the core. But he's missing the yid beneath the id. Freud says if we dig, we'll find mud, and Torah says if we dig deeper, we'll find diamonds. So we all know that Yosef also interpreted dreams, right? Yosef is Yud, Vav, Samech, Fei. So the Samech Fei, that's hinting towards Sigmund Freud, but he's missing the Yud and the Vav, two holy letters of Hashem's name. That there's diamonds beneath the dirt. That our core self is sacred and untouchable. So, and we must give our students this confidence that they can find the Yud and the Vav below, that they can find Hashem's name, that their soul is pristine. We have to spread the message to our students and friends, right? Okay, now we come to Hashem. Now it's getting exciting. L'chaim, l'chaim, for this Yontif of Chai Elul. Okay, we get to Hashem. So Shlomo was the great psychologist. Yehezkel was the great Navi. We heard from the Torah, and now we're going to hear from Hashem. Okay, because we know Hashem transcends heaven and earth. We know that part. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev said to an atheist, the God that you don't believe in, I don't believe in either. It's a very important idea. The God that you don't believe, we have more in common than you think. The God that you don't believe in, I don't believe in. The God the atheist denies might be a God good to deny. We might think more alike, we might be more alike than we think. Like the God of religious arrogance. Now that's a God that we can deny. That's not the God we're looking for. The real God transcends Chachma and Nevuah and Torah. So Hashem has a different response to this question than psychology, spirituality, even religion. Hashem has a different answer. Hashem has a non-conventional response. Since God has no image, he can have an unconventional response. Okay, again, a quick review. The psychologist says, these are the consequences. I'll show you the way. The Navi says you're detaching yourself from Hashem's will and breath. The Torah says, I know about your pure soul. And Hashem says, Yaseh tshuva v'yiskapir lo. Let him do tshuva and he'll be atoned for. Mistakes are the only opportunity for a Jew to do tshuva. Making mistakes gives us an opportunity to do tshuva, an opportunity for recovery, an opportunity to discover truth in far more profound ways than if we had never sinned. Oh, that one I'm going to have to repeat. So, So making a mistake is the only opportunity for a Jew to do tshuva. It's an opportunity for recovery, an opportunity to discover a truth in far more profound ways than if we had never sinned. Wow, that is cool. So it's not, Hashem is saying it's not a mistake, it's an opportunity for rejuvenation. It's, because, and true tshuva means not just I'm a bad guy, it had bad results, I learned my lesson. Not just I really learned my lesson because it was a death call. But tshuva is deeper. It's questioning and redefining the notion, did you do a bad thing? If you learn from it, if we learn from it to be a more loving and kind and honest and humble person, a more godly person, a deeper person, then it was a profound catalyst for growth. We want to redefine it as a profound catalyst for growth. The person who stumbles and learns from this, the loss becomes part of the passion. They say there's no love like love that has been lost, and you reclaim it. The loss becomes part of the passion of the love. Yes. So this is it. The thirst gives new passion. No one appreciates health like someone who lost it. The loss becomes part of the passion with which a person embraces their life. So we're getting empowered on Chai Elul, that our tshuva should become a passion with which we can embrace our lives. Let's do it. This is Chai Elul, we're being empowered by our holy teachers to embrace our life with passion from our tshuva. So from the sin, we create a path to return. From the place we got lost, we create a path to recovery. Okay, so there is this idea. This is so beautiful. So this idea of redefining the sin is another mitzvah. I just want to speak a little bit about that idea. So, and we learned this. So it says in Gemara Yuma, and the Alter Rebbe brings it down in the third book of Tanya, Geras HaTshuva. He brings down this idea that this idea of tshuva. The idea of tshuva, that again we spoke about it, that it means refraining. It's taking on that moment of refraining from all sin. It's saying that I want to do your will, Hashem. I want to get close to you. Feeling the moment of reconnecting with Hashem. I want to share what the Maharal said, the mashal of the Maharal on this Yalkut Shmoni that we've just learned in great depth. So the Maharal tells a story. He says there's a guy a servant of the king, and the king gives him a very precious vessel. And he's holding this precious vessel of the king. That's his shlichus. And somehow, for whatever reason, the vessel shatters. And he's heartbroken. He doesn't know what to do. He goes to a friend of the king. And the friend, this is the lowest level, the level of Chachma. He goes to a friend of the king. And the friend says, this is very bad. This is very negative. This is not going to have a good effect on your relationship with the king at all. He's feeling quite bad. He goes to even a closer friend of the king, Nevuah, who says, you better get out of here. You better hide. You better run away. If the king sees what happened to his vessel, you're in trouble. And then he goes to the craftsman who made it. And the craftsman who made it, and this is the Torah, because Hashem looked into the Torah to create the world. He goes to the craftsman who made it, who says, I can fix it. I can put the broken fragments together, but it's not going to look how it looked when you first received the vessel from the king. So the guy just feels he has to go straight to the king himself. He's going to be honest. He's going to throw himself down at the feet of the king and beg for mercy and just confess what happened. And he tells the king what happened and how he went to these 3 people for advice what to do. And then he came here to the king. And the king said that the 3 people you went don't really know the most inner me. In my most inner chamber, I only have broken vessels. Broken vessels are what's really precious to the king in his innermost chamber. I guess the way they reflect the light, something like that. And this is the mashal of the Maharal today on his yahrzeit. King loves broken vessels. Isn't that exciting? We can get into the king's innermost chamber, just broken vessels that we may be. Because life, all right. I'm not going to be philosophical. So I also heard this interesting story. When we were in Prague, we heard the story from Rav Yitzchak, and I also heard it online today, which revitalized my memory, that when the Maharal was 15, he was already recognized as a great genius, and many people wanted him as his son-in-law. And there was a certain merchant who had a daughter named Peril, and somehow they worked out that the father-in-law was going to support him while he continued learning, and different things of that nature. And then, so there was an engagement, and then the father-in-law lost all his money, and he wrote the Maharal that, he doesn't have to feel attached by the engagement. He forgives him if he understands if he wants to break the engagement. And the Maharal didn't refuse to break the engagement, and they waited years and years before there was just absolutely no money, and then there was a miracle. Peril baked bread to support her old parents, and some Eliyahu Navi, I guess, came by and speared a loaf, and she ran out and said, "Have mercy on a young girl supporting her elderly parents." And so he dropped somehow she got a bag of gold and coins, and she was able to marry the Maharal 10 years after their engagement. So the Maharal was an interesting kind of guy, we have to say, and he's told us that to do tshuva means to say to Hashem, I want to do tshuva, I want to get close to you. What I wanted to share from what the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya Nageris Tshuva, quoting Gemara Yuma, we've spoken about this idea that if we do tshuva out of fear, then our intentional sins become like mistakes. Because if I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have done it. It was a mistake. I didn't know. So if we did, the lowest level of fear is fear of punishment. That's the lowest level. I mean, it's not so romantic, but it can work in a fix. The next level is fear of Hashem, that I don't want to injure my relationship with Hashem. So if we do tshuva out of fear, our intentional sins become mistakes. Gemara says, and the Alter Rebbe quotes, if we do tshuva out of love, our intentional sins become like mitzvahs, become redefined as merits, as mitzvahs, because they became a catalyst for growth. So this is the point. This is the point. We have to make it into a catalyst for growth. So that means we really do have to become deeper people and less judgmental people, and all of those more honest people. So this is using it as a catalyst for growth. It's an amazing idea, and I think it's really quite relevant to what we've been learning in Transforming Darkness into Light, our book that we've been learning the last months and months, and the Meretz Hashem will continue learning next Sunday. But this idea of what could be more than transforming darkness into light than the traumas of our life, the suffering of our life, the transgressions of our life, if we could make all of that into a catalyst for growth. And this is what we're being empowered now. It's really Chai Elul. And there's 12 days between Chai Elul and Rosh Hashanah, and they say in each of these 12 days we can do tshuva for one of the days of this past year. And the king is in the field, and he's And by lowering the ego, we create the suction that sucks in Hashem's presence and rachamim. I think that's such a beautiful idea. And that's where joy is. That's true joy. Hashem's shiftless and Hashem's presence. So this is a very strong time. Hi, elul. So Hashem should bless us that we should be successful. We should be successful in our efforts, go from strength to strength in these very deep ideas. We're so lucky to learn it. This is the idea. Not only do we have a relationship with Hashem, and Hashem is letting us know that we can make the relationship better in this very strong time, since can everyone just put on their cameras, because I put that human effect. So here we are for bringing, I like this. I like seeing the people. So, this is great. Oh, look, they wave and everything. They smile. Now I'm feeling more for bringing. L'chaim, l'chaim.